Thank you for listening to this installment of the Veterinary Cannabis Society podcast series. My name is Emily Stewart, and I manage development and outreach at VCS. Our mission is to create lasting solutions that ensure safe use of cannabis in pets through education, advocacy, and promoting product standards. In this podcast, I interview Tyler Dautrich, COO of Releaf app. He manages the Veterinary Research Initiative, a special program created for veterinary cannabis product makers. VCS sponsors get a discount on this program. Tyler tells us why standardized observational studies are so important to the scientific development of cannabis products, especially for pets. He also explains how to use scientific data to target new customers and earn greater engagement with existing ones. I was enlightened and inspired by this podcast. Be sure to like it and subscribe if you are as well. Now, on to the podcast. All right, Tyler. Well, let's just go ahead and jump into it. What I came to VCS understanding was that MoreBetter is a software data and research organization. I had actually heard about MoreBetter through the Releaf app. But from what I understand, MoreBetter was actually a data-focused organization before the launch of the Releaf app. So do you mind just telling me a little bit about the history of MoreBetter and how it came to be as it is today?
Yeah, sure. And first off, thanks for having me on here. Looking forward to diving into this. The episode with Sean was great, so excited to follow up here.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, absolutely. So the story goes back to like pre 2014, 16 era. So that's obviously when medical cannabis started to become more commercialized in some of the states across the country, and you saw just kind of the domino effect really start to happen there. My partners in MoreBetter come from a pretty versed background in software and tech development. So they've owned their own consulting firm based out of Maryland, and they actually built the face of IBM's Watson and did a lot of work with like NASA, Microsoft, Adobe, government entities, like Fortune 500 companies. So like they're very good at what they do with software and technology. And all of us, whether personally and or with like a loved one, had an interest in medical cannabis because of some type of health issue where it was either a parent or a grandmother or whatever had just bad experiences with traditional medicine. It's like, hey, here's an option that seems to be better for you. But every time it was getting bad recommendations from dispensaries, having adverse events, and not really knowing what to do. And our partners were like, hey, we know what we're doing when it comes to software and technology. So like why wouldn't we just develop an app that allows people to track their use and experience, and we can crowdsource that data to try to get better insights out there. Our motto is data, not reviews. So we can use that data to help individuals make more informed decisions with data, not reviews. And that's essentially what kind of birthed the idea of Releaf app. And the team spent a couple of years kind of developing and getting beta tests out. And fast forward to where we're at today. MoreBetter, like you mentioned, is a software data and research company. We have two different tools that we use to collect real world data on the use and the performance of a specific product based on specific reasons that it's being used for. That is the Releaf app, which is now a 2 times patented app, and we have our third patent pending. And then our web-based tool is called Penzai. And like I mentioned, Penzai is a web-based software, so you do not need to download a mobile app to use it. And Penzai was developed to do more of a structured study to simplify it, where we have more control over what questions are asked, when those questions are asked, and it's more of a setup to be longitudinal rather than in the Releaf app. That is very much a patient and consumer centric tool where we are not restricting or requiring you as the end user to answer any specific question or put any type of input in the app. It's very much use this how you feel it's best suited for you, and the app will use what you input to give you your own insights and feedback back to you to, again, go back to that decision of we want to help you make more informed decisions around your medical cannabis use. And those two tools allow us to collect a pretty wide and robust data set of this real world data on the use and performance of specific products for the reasons that they're being used for.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I already have so many questions. So, regarding the real world data that you're gathering in these two different ways, other than for commercial businesses like Sean Zire of Earth Buddy Pet, the podcast that you mentioned earlier, that is also on this YouTube channel. He used MoreBetter program to study. I actually don't know, I think two different products, I believe, but I could be wrong.
No, I think we did 3 to 5 different products. Actually, it was just on 2 different like use cases. So I think there was like 3 products that we looked at for helping like calming for pets. And those were just different administration forms. So there's like a spray, a tincture, and then like a treat. And then the other was 2 unique formulations with I think some minor cannabinoids in there where we looked at those for like joint stiffness and mobility in pets.
Okay, awesome. I remember that. So I, before we started recording, you mentioned that you're working with Israeli, Australian, and United States organizations, including medical journals, to, I presume, bring this research into like a clinical context? Because the reason I'm asking is one of the reasons that your program is so appealing to our sponsors and our commercial members is because they can't typically afford to conduct a full clinical trial for their products. And MoreBetter's program helps them access real world data that's close to what they could get in a clinical trial, especially because they don't plan to print it or publish it. It's just for their own commercial use. So it's interesting to me that you kind of bridge you bridge the gap between, university level, clinical, peer reviewed, and simply creating the best product or the best use in the case of the Releaf app. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, for the most part, I can clarify and take a step back too. So, um, yeah, from our focus, again, it's our focus is collecting real world data on the use and the performance of a specific product based on the reason that product is used for. And like you mentioned, we're kind of bridging the gap between how we see it, at least. On one extreme is the traditional kind of gold standard clinical research track that like your pharma and biotech companies go down, which is like millions and millions of dollars and years, if not decades, until a product gets to the market. And obviously, there's just so many barriers to just a few things I just said, plus more that we won't get into. And then on the other extreme opposite end is what's readily available is like consumer reviews. And 2 quick sense on that is one, a consumer review in our opinion is just like a singular snapshot of the emotional state of that individual at the time they decided to leave that review. It doesn't really show you the use and the performance of that product over time. And the second thing nowadays with like media companies and these different blog and publisher sites, like a lot of these reviews are just bought now for promotional purposes. So when you look at those 2 extremes, there's obviously a very wide gap in between those two. And from our perspective, in between those two are hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people using these alternative natural health and wellness products, supplements, et cetera, like medical cannabis or just cannabis, where they're using these products on a regular basis, if not a daily basis, and they're using them for very specific objectives in their daily wellness routine. So if we could just crowdsource and kind of standardize data collection across even a fraction of these people, the amount of insights that could be generated and how quickly those insights could be generated is just like nothing that's really ever been done before, because it's always been either there's a review or there's a clinical study. And observational research is obviously in the middle there, which is, again, kind of where we have looked to expedite things on the observational side of things. So that's just kind of a quick background to fill in the gaps on just like our view of the research space and where we fit into it. We will never, very unlikely, go down a traditional clinical route because that's just not our area of expertise. There's better and bigger companies to go do that if you want to go down like the traditional clinical route. And we also just think there's a gap that we're better suited for. However, we are not one of the companies out there that are saying like we're replacing clinical studies or that you don't need to do a clinical study. Like it's the gold standard and it has been for so long because there's a need for it. There is a certain need and a certain time where a company should go down the traditional clinical route, and we don't want to even pretend that like we're replacing that or leapfrogging that or anything of the sorts. We're getting data in a different way that just gives you more real world evidence and real world insights on day-to-day usage and outcomes. So that's just the step back. And then, yeah, to your point, the company MoreBetter, we have really two focuses or two arms, however you want to reference it, of the business. So there's the more commercial route, which is what Sean and the Earth Buddy Pet team did, which I'm sure we'll get into more in this podcast. And then there's the more what we call quote unquote traditional research route, where in that setting, we're going down the IRB approved path for real world observational studies. And that is actually really where most of our business activity started back in like 2016 to 2019 is where we were really active in that particular space. And that was at that point exclusively via data we were collecting in the Releaf app with medical cannabis patients and just general cannabis consumers, mostly across the country, but we were and still are collecting data across the world. And what happened was we started to get interest we always had an interest in research. We're like, hey, we're collecting all this data on something where the government is saying there's no data. So like, how do we show that that's not true? And at that same time, you started to see announcements from universities across the country and across the world where it's like, hey, as a university, we are either setting up a particular department or we have a interest in expanding and increasing medical cannabis research and or the research on the use of cannabinoids. And we were like, cool, why don't we work together? And we started reaching out to all of these universities. And the result of that is we ended up building a academic research partner network that has about 10 to 12 academic research partners and collaborators in it. Most of them are throughout the US, but we do have one or two in Israel and Australia. And what we do with them and what we have been doing since, again, like 2017 is just kind of ongoing observational research studies. And the result of that is to date, I believe we have 16 studies published in different medical journals. And those studies are published across, I believe, 9 different medical journals. And again, most of those studies have been from like observational retrospective analysis of data coming from the Releaf app. But in the past, I'd say 2-ish years, we are starting to publish more studies from data that we're collecting via our Penzite tool, where we are working with universities to go out and collect more of a structured data set around this is the particular product or this is the particular formulation that we're studying for this particular use case. And we're using, in the research community, more of the standardized or validated assessment tools that are kind of the recognized questionnaires that you use in a remote and decentralized study format is like, these are the questions and this is the scoring criteria of how you assess severity for pain or anxiety or sleep or whatever the case may be. And that allows us to now anchor the data that we're collecting to a more sophisticated research structure rather than just what was kind of like the cross-sectional self-journaling that was being collected and published in the Releaf app. So it allows us to continue this real-world data focus, but really come at it from both sides, where we can have a very kind of informal, cross-sectional, self-reported journaling area, but we can also get very rigorous and structured and follow pretty much to the T best practices when it comes to like observational real-world research.
This is awesome. And I have to say that, so most of the people who are going to be listening to this podcast are very nerdy veterinary cannabis obsessives.
Those were
Who
our people.
want yes, exactly. So the what you're sharing with me is just so fascinating, and I love how you've just followed, you see both sides of the coin. And when it comes to veterinary, those two sides of the coin are so much more important, because those animals, as you know, can't tell us how they're feeling.
Right.
They have to show us how they're feeling, and we only can interpret it.
Right.
So being able to have these, and I guess this is going to get into the more focus of this podcast, which is how does someone use the MoreBetter
Yeah.
vet research program, as we've named it. But anyway, to be able to have these two sides of the coin covered, where we can have this observational view, the long-term data gathering of how a certain product is affecting our pet for a certain case in a certain way, and then have the quantitative side of it covered. I think that's just going to bring a lot of product understanding to producers, and then a lot of comfort to pet parents who are worried about what they're administering to their pet and want to make sure that they're actually gathering the results that they need from it, and the results are nuanced. So I know that you've mostly started this with human cannabis use, but to me, it seems so obvious to use in the veterinary cannabis
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. I mean, just to comment on that quick, it's yes, you're right, and it's even bigger too. So this goes back to like pre, 2010, maybe even like again 2017, 2018, me commenting like on the background of and the start of MoreBetter. Like we always had aspirations to be the software data and research company, and Relief app and medical cannabis just made sense from like scratching your own itch perspective out the gate. But like very quickly, specifically in the medical cannabis space, it was like there's if there's no data from the use of cannabinoids for humans, then like what do you call what's in the veterinary space with cannabinoids and pets? Like there's literally nothing there if there's nothing in the human side. But yet people are either just like giving it to their pets, or people are trying to do research there, but you're clearly just seeing more and more brands pop up that are targeting that market. So we were always really really interested in, and all of our team members are like big pet people. My Great Dane is sleeping next to me while we're doing this. And it's always just been we're not we're not veterinarians ourselves, right? So like when we were developing Relief app, we were the medical cannabis patients, or we were caring for loved ones that were using medical cannabis. So it was like very easy to conceptualize and put ourselves in the perspective of the user and understand how to make a great user experience from in Relief app from that perspective and collect the relevant data. But like obviously that's not apples to apples comparison when switching over to the vet space. And if you know anything, or if anyone knows anything about app development, like it's not a simple software thing. Like it's very easy to tweak websites and stuff like that. But if you're doing something app wise and then trying to put it out into like the Google or iOS Play Store, like that's a whole other project. So we were never going to like dive headfirst into that space unless it made sense to. And that's when, connecting with the VCS team and talking to your team and just realizing that we were aligned on like kind of goals, missions, and objectives, this made a lot of sense to now with our web-based tool, we can work with pet owners in a very kind of low friction way and get more of this structured data and just start getting that out there more. And that continues to evolve to where specifically on Penzai, our web-based tool, like this is no longer a cannabis thing. This is going back to my original statement on just like reviews versus clinical research and what's in between. There's countless, specifically nowadays, products that are in this like alternative, natural, functional wellness space, right? With cannabinoids, mushrooms, kratom, kava, nootropics, like you name it, the list goes on, and there's always new product categories like coming to market nowadays. And while the regulation or the regulatory landscape is different for most of these products and like cannabis as a Schedule 1 drug, they're all very similar from like doctors don't know how to talk about these products 9 out of 10 times. All of these products are over the counter or purchased directly online from a direct to consumer perspective. there's very minimal, if any, clinical studies on these products. And what we do have is like the anecdotal kind of like internet scraping observational studies that are out there of just like, here's a bunch of different sources and what these different sources say. And it's just like, again, these products are selling like crazy. So if there's that many people using these products, then we can again crowdsource and standardize data collection across it and get better data out there for this space in general, so that as patients and consumers start to look at what are the non-pharma options for me, whether it's a very serious medical condition to whether it's just like, hey, I'm tired in the afternoon and I don't want to drink caffeine anymore. So like, what else gives me energy? That's a space where, again, it's much bigger than cannabis, and it's going back to the same mission, collecting data to help individuals make better decisions with data, not reviews. Give them that transparency on this particular product was used by this group of people for this long, for this reason, and here's the outcomes. And because it's more of a longitudinal, we can look at statistical significance over time and start to point to what seems to be more of like a predictable outcome rather than just like, hey, this is just what Joe Schmo said with the one time you tried it type of deal. So yeah, the veterinary space has always been very interesting, huge opportunity, and just like putting cannabis in much more of this broader, what I summarize as like a functional wellness category. It's just there's so much need to get better data out there for these products that people are buying and consuming like crazy without any real evidence or data or transparency around what's actually working for what.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you start opening up that supplements can of worms, and then there's no coming back right now. There's nothing to depend on.
Right.
There's no standards, there's no procedures, and there's nowhere to turn that you can trust. It's just an influencer thing.
Yeah. It's a big influencer and marketing game. Who can brand themselves the best, regardless of like what's actually going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And that kind of is a nice segue into my asking you more about how VCSers can use the MoreBetter program, because I think one of the end goals, if I'm correct, for a company utilizing MoreBetter's vet research program is to be able to market the real world data that they gathered. Is that correct?
Yeah. And this goes back to, again, there's two kind of arms or focuses of the company. There's the more traditional research route, and then there's the more commercial route, which for simplicity's sake, their commercial route mimics exactly what happens in the traditional research route. It's just the objectives and the goals of the company are different. Where in the traditional route, the company wants to be able to say, my product or my brand is published in this peer-reviewed journal. For whatever reason, that's their goal. On the commercial route, the goal is different. It's just like, I want to collect better data on who's using my product, why they're using it for, and how it's performing. And I want to create data-backed marketing content. That's my goal and objective. And again, that's evidenced by like the Sean on Earth Buddy Pet's website. I think it's like across the main menu, there's like a learn tab that has a drop down, and then there's like industry studies or something, I believe. And he created a whole webpage that's wrapped around just one of the two campaigns that we did there around all the data that we collected. So that's really, whether it's the VCS community or just like any other brand out there, it's, do you want to take, in our opinion, a better customer engagement and or customer acquisition route where you're actually keeping a group of individuals engaged with you over time who are using your product, and you're interacting with them on a daily basis to collect feedback on their use and experience with that product focused on a very specific reason, and then flip that data on the back end to resell them to continue purchasing your product and put more transparent data-backed content out in the world, in all of your marketing channels, to show like, hey, this is actually the use and the performance of our product. Here's transparently who used our product, why they used it, and what they experienced. And from the brand's perspective on that commercial side, when it comes to like your comment of they want to market with that data, like we've seen that be a huge asset, the data be a huge asset for brands in the marketing perspective, with improving conversion rates, increasing average order size, increasing repeat customers. Because again, like who else is out there collecting, real world data over time from their customers and then using that as like the content marketing strategy out there, that they're now able to differentiate themselves with like, we're not just saying we're the best, and we're not just saying we have all these clean ingredients or these organic ingredients. It's like, here's actual evidence, here's actual data that we collected on the performance of this product. And again,
I
it's not
think
that they're out there making claims, right? Sean's not saying this tincture cures insomnia for pets or cures arthritis for your pets or any of those ridiculous statements. What he's saying is, here's some evidence from this sample of people that shows what this is the impact the product had on their pet based on their reporting of their pet's day to day before using the product and while using our product.
Yeah, that to me, there's actually, just based on my talking to the organizations that we work with and some that we don't work with, especially outside the USA, organizations that we're just partnered with, so many of the general staff of these organizations, the people who take the orders, the people who are developing the products, especially in the smaller organization, the CEO, the COO, the customer service person, they get called and they get asked, I have a pet with XYZ, I'm buying this product, how much do I give and how do I use it? Like, they're going to the company themselves and asking those questions. And the companies we work with are great, so they're able to say it. But wouldn't it be nice if they had some of that information already available and ready for people to look at on their own? To me, this sounds like a time-saving effort, even though it's going to take, and we can talk more about how much time this actually takes to do like one product, one use case. But I think that would be so helpful to these organizations just to field inquiries from potential customers and current customers who still need more information.
Yeah, 100%. Like, and we actually have like a whole blog post around this on our website, that when a lot of brand or brand owners or marketers hear about like this real world data concept or strategy for the first time, their mind immediately goes to, well, like we don't have the time or interest to do research. And it's like, okay, but like it's a whole lot deeper and wider than doing research. It's understanding, in our completely unbiased opinion, the most about your consumers possible, right? Like, even if you just want to ignore the use and the performance data around your product, the amount of consumer and or customer demographic info that we're collecting, like, you're not getting that anywhere else. Or you're paying, a significant amount of money to some market research firm to go out and do whatever they're going to do to come back with either the same or even less data in some cases. And we even had a brand who, they named their product something specific because that's what they were targeting. And it was a product that it was referencing like weight loss. That the name of the product, and I don't want to give too many specifics away, but the name of the product was something where if you read it, it wasn't a stretch to assume like, oh, if I use this, I should lose weight. When really, one, that's a slippery slope in general. But two, what the product was supposed to do is help with appetite suppressant and help you manage your appetite. So we did a campaign with them and went out to collect data on the use of the product in helping with appetite suppressant. And the data came back overwhelmingly positive. This product really helps with appetite suppressant. However, when we looked at a couple of because we always ask people, like, in addition to all this data, give us a 1 to 2 sentence review on just like your perspective of the product. And there was an amount of reviews that couldn't be ignored that essentially said the product doesn't work because I didn't lose enough weight. And it was like, well, we never mentioned weight loss like that. Like, in the campaign, there was no mention around you should lose weight. It was all around, let's see how this affects your appetite. And then we were going through everything. And we're like, oh, the product's named something that references this. And the brand was like, okay, we're redoing our entire marketing strategy and our product name to better fit this market. So like that's something where they had an effective product that consumers were having not even a bad experience. Consumers were having a good experience, but after that good experience, they were left thinking the product wasn't working for them because of what the name led them to believe. So again,
Yeah.
it just goes down to like this doesn't need to be you're trying to do research. It can just be, again, I want to do something unique in customer engagement. I want to do something different in customer loyalty. I want to offer my customers more personalized feedback. I want to just collect more in-depth data on who my customers are. There's a number of different angles you can take when you look at this just real world data kind of concept and customer engagement strategy where it doesn't have to be like medical efficacy focused.
Hmm. But to me, all of this informs clinical trials. Like, especially when it comes to veterinary
For
cannabis,
sure.
people are out there using stuff in a Wild West kind of way, pioneering their own case studies.
Yeah, yeah.
And, I think for me, I wish all of the organizations that we worked with would do the MoreBetter program for as many products as possible, because then we can, as you're saying, take back this data, present it to the clinical community, present it to the big bio firms that have the money to go do clinical studies and say, look how many people are using it in this way and getting these results. The next step then is that higher level study. So it's almost like crowdsourcing,
100%.
verifiable data, as you said, data that meets scientific standards, but it's still very much a grassroots effort. So yeah, I love it. And I love the way that our organizations can use it. So let me ask you a question. So first of all, actually, we've been talking very high level about the theory behind what we're doing and why it's important and why it matters. But say like I own a company, CBD oil Austria, because I'm currently in Austria. Actually, let's not put it in Europe. Let's say CBD oil Wisconsin. I don't know the
Good call.
regulations in Wisconsin, but
Yeah,
you know,
US. We'll summarize it at the US.
CBD oil US. Yeah. Say like I walk in and I'm like, I want to use the VCS vet research program to study my brand new full spectrum CBD oil, period. What's the process and what do I need to do to qualify for a study?
Yeah, so it's really really simple, and that's one of the things we've been focused on for the past couple of years is like making this as turnkey as possible so that it continues to lower the barrier of brands who can do it because again traditional research has such high barriers to like the brands that are able to do it. So essentially what happens is you come and you say like, hey, I got this product, and I guess let's just look at calming, right? Like my pet has anxiety and I'm trying to figure out like how to curb or lessen my pet's anxiety, or I want this product. I want to understand how pet parents are using this product to like curb anxiety or calm my dog. Cool. That's a very common topic. So we have a template because we can follow published studies out there like, hey, this is how you measure the performance of a particular product at helping calm pets. So again, going back to what I mentioned in the beginning, we mimic what is out there and what's kind of validated from observational, remote, real world setting data collection. And that's more or less the model that we work off of. And then that is the core structure of like, this is the data that's going to anchor the entire campaign so that we can point to something that's validated in the medical kind of research community. Now, in addition to that, we would say, in your ideal world, we deliver you a data report. What does that data report say about the performance of your products? What are you trying to learn about this particular product? What would you love to go market about this particular product? And then based on getting your feedback around that, we reverse engineer the process. So it's okay, we're starting with an understanding of we're focusing on this calming category. And then you threw out a couple other things that were important to you from a data perspective. So then we just bake those questions into the campaign of like, okay, if that's the ideal outcome, these are the questions that we would need to ask to get that data. And then honestly, that's as simple as it is. For campaigns that we already have templates for, we've gotten brands up and running within a few days. For campaigns where the brand's coming to us with a topic or a use case that's a little more niche or just something we haven't done before, it can be, 2-week process, maybe like 10 to 14 days, because at that point we're just doing a little more discovery with the brand around, okay, is this what you actually want to collect? Cool. And then we run from it from there. But again, it's trying to make it as turnkey as possible to lower that barrier of who can actually go out and collect this data on the use and the performance of their product. And then from that perspective, all you really need to do is market your product how you would market your product, right? Like you already have plans and objectives in place to get your product out in front of people and get people using your product. We just plug our software and a different call to action in there. So just referencing Sean again, he had a campaign planned where he wanted to do a big push to get people to try the 3 products that we looked at for helping people calm their pets. So it's like, okay, Sean, do that campaign, but instead of whatever kind of call to action you were going to have in there to do this giveaway previously, this is now the link that we're going to use. And all of these people will sign up to participate in this campaign, and then they'll get their product, then they'll participate, and we'll collect this data on the performance.
Okay. So I come to you, I say I have a CBD oil. I want to see if it helps Pomeranians stay calm. So then you say, okay, great. I'll work on the questions. We'll work backward from my goal, what I'm trying to learn. You'll work with me to create the questions based on the outcome. We determine those questions. Then it's my job as the organization to get my customers to participate in the study. How do they participate? Is it a cell phone? Is it going on to the Penzai website? What does that process look like? And I'm kind of asking as well, like, how do I need these customers to be my best customers? Because I'm going to ask a lot of them, kind of thing.
Yeah. So I guess pause. Can you hear all these dogs barking outside?
I don't hear it. And if if you hear any animals, it kind of works for the theme, but it's distracting. So take the animals out.
Yeah.
I cannot believe my cat is still whining.
So how it works. Yes, we understand what data you would like to collect. We essentially do an outline of the questions in like a Google Doc, and we send you that Google Doc and we say, hey, here's essentially the flow of the questions that we're going to ask. Make sure this looks good, add whatever comments you have. And then that way it's like, okay, cool. We're good on the questions. We put those questions into our software and we send you a link and we say, okay, you sign up and you go through a 5-day experience of what you would ask your participants to go through. So now at that point, you're doing exactly what you would be asking these individuals to do, these pet parents to do, except we're going to condense your timeline down because we want to do a quick turnaround. And then from there, you go through and you say, everything looks good, we're ready to go. And then, yes, the usual instance from there is that the brand is using this to either go out and acquire new customers or a better way to engage with existing customers. So a couple different ways that it could work. We've had a couple brands go to an affiliate partner, an influencer, and or a magazine/blog partner and say, hey, we want to do an exclusive campaign with you where we set aside 100 products exclusively for your audience. Put this announcement out that if your audience is looking to use a CBD product on their Pomeranian, we have the opportunity for them to get a free product if they agree to do this 2, 3, 4-week campaign with us. So cool, that goes out, people sign up, that's how it can work. In other instances, we've had brands do like a post-purchase call to action. So someone goes to their site, purchases the product, and then after they purchase the product, a pop-up comes up on the site or via email and says, hey, you want 50% off your next purchase? Do this 4-week campaign with us. The other option that we've seen brands do is go to a list of previous customers who either, 1, have not tried this product that they're looking at previously, or 2, haven't purchased from them in a while. And it's like a re-engagement strategy of like, hey, again, here's this cool opportunity just for you. Those are the 3 ways I would say we've seen brands go out and market this opportunity to get people to sign up previously. Most of the time in the commercial side of the business, that's how I guess the flow works. We do have some partners in the influencer and or publisher space where if it makes sense from like a target demographic perspective, we could go out and essentially recruit for the brand. That's just an additional service at that point where, again, we just have to make sure that the target audience kind of overlaps with where our partners and audience is at as well. But that's the start and the end process, I guess, without getting super into the weeds. So does that answer your
Yes.
question?
Definitely, definitely. And I know it is gonna, I assume it gets into the weeds because people go into have a consultation with you. You ask them myriad questions about their potential use cases, their outcomes, their actual product itself. I do have a question though in that regard. Is there any reason that a company would come to you, say, "Hi, I want to do the program," and you would say, "Sorry, we're not a good fit for you"? And again, through the veterinary cannabis sphere, excuse me.
Yeah. So one, obviously, if there's not any type of budget to facilitate anything, and they're just like, hey, can you do this for free? Would you be surprised at how many brands ask that? Like, you need to have some type of budget for this. Usually, our campaigns can be as low as like 5,000. A standard campaign can be around 10,000, but there's obviously a bunch of different variables and considerations that come into there. So like actually having a budget and being serious about it would be one of the first things that we want to understand. Like how much is this just like something the brand wants to have but has no real ambition to go do versus like how serious is the brand of like, no, like this is part of my growth strategy. I am going to collect this data. I'm very much focused on the use and the performance of my product, and I'm using that as the narrative of my marketing strategy. Like that's kind of the first thing that we try to suss out from on the initial call. And then from there, it's just, getting a feel for, is the brand real? Right? Like specifically in the spaces that we're talking about, there's a lot of just like fly by night brands that are just looking for the next best marketing hack to try to market their products because like we talked about in the beginning, in this natural product space that cannabinoids are in, it is largely who has the biggest budget and best marketing and or branding strategy that unfortunately wins a lot of the time. So those are two of the things that we look for. And then the last thing that we usually try to qualify too is like what a timeline looks like. Like if this is like, it's something I'm thinking about next year, then it's like, all right, well, then we'll follow up next year because chances are like you're not super serious about it versus like, again, no, this is something where the growth and the narrative around my company is going to be I'm very much focused on product performance and pushing that transparency out to my consumers so they know they're getting a product that has some type of quality and data behind it.
Awesome. Love it again. Okay, so once the study is ready to begin, this might be a little bit, you might not be able to answer this question without knowing the actual specific product and outcomes that you're looking for, but how many responses do you typically need? A
Mhm.
100 respondents, two, three?
Yeah, so the minimum number we always try to recommend to brands is you should try to get 100 people to sign up because in a worst case scenario, if you have half of those people, so 50 people drop out and you never hear from them again, at least you're still collecting data from 50 people, which is, just increases the odds of finding statistical significant events, which is what we're looking for in the data. Um, that being said, we have worked with some brands where some of their campaigns had closer to like 30 people, and we were still able to find some statistical significance outcomes in there. It's just like one, again, with 100, you have more room for cushion. The number 100 has more of a wow factor to it. But on the flip side, what I always try to really advocate for is we had some individuals and some brands who are on the smaller side say something along the lines of like, well, if I can't get, 100 people to sign up, this isn't worth me doing it. And I was like, okay, but do you have data from 10 people right now? And the answer is always no. I was like, okay, so like if you went out and got data from 10 people, you would have 10 times the amount of data that you have right now. So like why is anything less than 100 not good enough if you have zero right now? And that's just been one of I guess education points that we really had to drive home is that like people have this number in mind of like it's not worth it until you get there. And this was even like in the research and the medical community too for a while of like, oh, it doesn't mean anything until you reach this certain number. But okay, show me data from less than this number then. And if you can't show me data from like less than this number, then like why are you saying it doesn't matter until then when you have nothing you're working with right now? So yeah, that's a long-winded rant to your question. How many?
No, it absolutely makes. And as you were saying it, I was thinking of so many examples of times that this perception of getting to a certain number is the right or is going to open a door or explain everything. So many times in actually the functional wellness space where we're told that and there's no evidence to support it.
Right.
And you're saying, especially for small organizations that are trying to gather data on such a nebulous topic, which is cannabinoids in veterinary interventions,
Mm-hmm.
any data is helpful data. And when you're saying, especially too, that these organizations, I hate to say it this way, but we're working with the good guys who have high quality products. They know it, they believe it, they need to prove it, versus the bad guys who are those people who were covered in the Amazon. A recent article that was published that interviewed Dr. Trina Hazar, founder, about the horrible quality products on Amazon right now for pets. So yeah, I totally hear you that even a small amount of data is better than no data at all, and will probably inform your next product formulations, which is the goal.
Even to just give you a unique way to differentiate yourself in a crowded space, right? Like even if you're the small company on the block and there's the big company right down the block and you have a superior product from like a formulation and a quality perspective, but like you're both saying these products help calm pets, like chances are no one's going to hear about you because someone else down the block is spending more money to get out there more, right? So how can you differentiate yourself and stand out when you can't compete from like an ad spend perspective, right? Or even if you can compete from an ad spend perspective, right? Let's say both these brands are making the same amount of sales on a monthly and yearly basis. They both have the same amount of sales, same amount of money, and a product that's quality that's marketed towards the same audience. How do you differentiate from that company, right? So sure, you can hold yourself to it doesn't matter until I get to 100, but like if you can't get to 100 and then that brand comes out and has data about 10 people they did a little campaign with, I would probably go to the company that's showing me data on 10 people that they did a little campaign with versus a company that's showing me none. So it's just a matter of, again, starting somewhere. You can always build, right? Like that's the other benefit with this real world data is like it can be set up to be ongoing and compounding. And as long as you're not changing the formulation, like you can just continue to collect data over time on the use and performance of your product. So yeah, I think that's going back to like your initial statement a couple minutes ago at this point on just like brands wanting to do this to market. Yes, it helps you differentiate. So again, I'm always hesitant and pretty critical of brands when they put this any number, whether it's 100 or 500 or whatever, out there. It's like it doesn't matter until I'm able to do this. Well, I challenge that.
Mm-hmm. You actually just touched on an idea or a question that I've had ruminating in my brain. Knowing a lot of our veterinarians as well as the companies that we work with, and then knowing how Sean used your study. When we first started talking about this, I assumed that a study had to be, as you mentioned, one product, one use case for a set period of time. However, that's not how a lot of veterinary cannabis interventions work. It's going to be a long period of time with one product and one animal, and there'll be 5 people doing this at once, and then someone drops off and someone comes back on. So the question I was going to ask is, does there have to be an end to the study? And your answer is no, it can be ongoing and compounding. My question is, how then, because when I interviewed Sean, he said we did this, it was for this time period, then we closed the study, and then Tyler took it back, and it took them 3 months, maybe, don't quote me on that, but a while to analyze. And then he gave me the data. So how, if I was going to do an ongoing compounding study, especially I'm thinking in horses, this is going to come up in the equestrian space
Which
a
is
lot.
really interesting space, but yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it is. And they are like the nerdiest of nerdy
For sure.
about this stuff.
Yeah.
Horse people, man, you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I mean, honestly, that was one of the, outside of the obvious, like dogs
Yeah.
and cats, the scene, we met somebody at a conference who was a big CBD manufacturer in Michigan, and like his biggest client, even though he didn't even advertise it, his biggest client was an equestrian group. And it's like, oh wow, that tons of
Mhm.
sense. And like you wouldn't think about it, but it's just like, yeah, like they are spending so much money to make sure these animals are in the best health they can be. And they're using this product where like they're using it because they hear it works good on humans, and there's some rumors that it's working good on other pets. So like, hey, why not a horse? It's like, well, again, there's just a lot of opportunity to like bring some more evidence to that space. But
Yeah.
tangent.
Yeah. And they're the ones that are not going to do very well. From the little, I'm ignorant, but from what I understand, they're not going to do very well with 2 months long study, and they're not going to have 100 horses, you know? So how would this be more on their onus to do their own data collection? Or, does the Penzai website give them regular data? How does that work, I
Yeah,
guess?
so the Penzai software is extremely flexible from how long does a campaign or a study last for. Like one of our studies that we did with University of Michigan that they're currently crunching the numbers on, that was a study where each participant was in the study for like 90 days. So the time is completely customizable on a case by case basis. What I would say when we engage with brands, we always try to have a specific start and end window so that we can generate an initial data report. Because if it's something that's just continuously ongoing, it just comes down to like, when do you generate the data report, right? So we always, if we're looking at like a one-off campaign, we always look at, okay, here's a window that we're going to start and end. So that way, even just from like a managing expectations perspective, the brand owner can understand like, okay, here's when I can expect to receive a data report on the performance of this product. Now, that being said, in a case with like horses, is there some cases where it so most of our campaigns are like a 4 week campaign. So most of them we try to measure daily habits before they use the product, and then for a week, and then 3 weeks of using the product, so we can get like the before versus after, or before versus during impact. However, there's been cases where it just didn't make sense to go that long. So we went down to like 2 to 3 weeks. Or in some cases, it was like, it's not reasonable to expect the product to have an impact in this short amount of time. So we need to extend it and go longer. So it can be, and often is customized on that case by case basis if it logically makes sense because of what we're looking at, right? So like horses might just be a space where it logically makes sense to do something longer because of what we're looking at in that particular case. Now, that being said, we are starting to work with brands where they don't have a particular interest in doing like this one-off campaign. They have a bigger interest in going back to like this customer engagement and kind of loyalty strategy I mentioned, where it's just like, hey, we want this every single time someone buys and uses one of our products. Like we just want to be able to, if nothing else, have the option that is every time after someone buys our product, this is part of our offering to them. I'm like, hey, do you want to sign up for this campaign and work with us to crowdsource this awesome data set on the use and performance of this product for this reason? Here's the incentive we'll give you to do that. And then from that perspective, that is where like you essentially turned on a data faucet that is never ending at that point, right? Like as long as you're selling products, you're putting yourself in a position to collect data over time on the use and experience of that product. And that's where then in that situation, your data can just continue to compound, where, month one, it could be here, we got data from like 10 people, but then at the end of the year, we have data from a couple hundred people who use the product over the course of the year. So
Okay.
again, it all comes down to like kind of personalizing and customizing within a structured format, which those things are, I know contradictory to itself just by nature, but that's really how we look at it, because the software can be flexible, and there's a number of different ways with you can go about collecting this real world data based on the goals and objectives of the brand.
Awesome. That's really, really exciting. I'm actually personally very glad we had this conversation, because I know I walked into it thinking that the program was, kind of always structured in the way that Sean used it.
Mhm.
And what I'm hearing is actually it is, while it's a scientifically upstanding program, there is a lot of flexibility based. And that's how it should be. Actually, scientific investigations should be based
Mhm.
on the outcome, on the goal of the study, right? And
Yeah.
it should vary. And if we look at veterinary cannabis, I mean, I think the biggest hurdle, just from a cannabinoid and use case perspective, is that every single animal's endocannabinoid system is so radically different.
Right.
And we kind of don't even know which way to point the arrow.
Right.
So these studies that you can do for people like the companies that we work with will really inform the scientific community on where to point the arrow.
Yeah. I mean, that's the line that we try to, balance all the time, is like keeping things structured, but also being able to be super flexible. Because again, like historically, that's just one of the other barriers with doing research, is like those two things just don't work in traditional research together. And I would say where we usually put a foot in the ground and kind of stand firm on is the structure in which the data is collected, meaning the assessment tools and the what I'll call the backbone questions that are really going to anchor the campaign, because that then allows us to standardize the outcomes across any different animal type or across any different product type, if we zoom out of pets and we zoom out of cannabis, right? Like if we're collecting data on the use of a product to calm pets the same way in regards to like the core questions we're asking, then it doesn't matter if we're doing it for a cat or for a dog or for a horse or on any type of product. We can then start to look at that data in aggregate and really start to understand what's working across the board when we look at this particular topic, right? Where it gets flexible and personalized is when we get down into the specifics around like the implementation, the length of things, etc. And like, do you want to learn anything unique about your particular customers or your particular users, right? That's where it's like super easy to be flexible and provide that more of a unique data set to the particular brand that we're talking with at that point, where in aggregate though, their data is going to be able to essentially be standardized across all other data for that particular category, which, going to your comment around the endocannabinoid system, is wildly different for all different types of animals. If you standardize data in that way, you can start to compare those outcomes in different animals and start to try to really hone in on what is working for different animals, right? And this is like in the human cannabinoid and cannabis space, like that's one of the biggest interest areas for us, and this obviously bleeds into the veterinary space with cannabinoids, but is remove these ridiculous strain names and brand names and product names, and like let's look at the formulation of these products. Like, what's the THC ratio, what's the CBD ratio, what cannabinoids and terpenes are in there, and let's start to look at the cluster of those compounds tied to outcomes. And when you can start to collect that volume in a structured way, that's where things start to get really, really interesting. in regards to just the future of this of cannabinoids as medicine, right? Because now you're able to tell a pet owner, or your mom, or whatever the case may be, when you go into the store, it doesn't matter what the brand name is. It doesn't matter what the product name is. When you flip over the label, this is what you want to see on the label. This is what you want to start to look at. And if you see the label falls within this range, you have a likelihood of reaching this outcome. And I think like that's what's really missing in the cannabis space across the board right now. And again, goes back to the comment we repeated a couple times now, where it unfortunately is a marketing and a branding game. And people are like, oh, I need to go in and look for like this strain name by this brand. And it's just like,
Because I heard it's great. That's all.
right, exactly.
Period.
Right. And it's like, yeah, because you heard it's great, there's probably 5 different strains that have that same strain name because that group knows it's selling. So like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's I think it goes into that's the line that we continue to balance between what we want to keep kind of standardized and structured and what we don't have a lot of wiggle room and flexibility on, versus where it can be really open-ended in regards to like the flexibility on a kind of campaign by campaign or brand by brand basis.
I do have one data question that I'm not actually sure how you'll feel about my asking, because I don't know. So you have all this data. MoreBetter
Uh,
has all this data from all these different organizations. Does MoreBetter store that data and then all the different veterinary cannabis organizations that used CBD isolate with dogs who are anxious? Do you have all that data ready to go, and can you use it to say lobby the government or maybe in another way?
yeah, so yes, we have ownership over all the data is the short answer, but the more in-depth answer summarized is it's largely in like anonymized and aggregate use cases, right? Because like it doesn't serve our business any purpose to say, hey world, here's how Emily's CBD product compares to Tyler's CBD product. Like it doesn't do us any benefit to like single your brand out. There's zero value for us to do that, right? That's why we're working with you, to give you your singular data set and let you go to town with your singular data set. On our perspective, what's interesting is the aggregate anonymous. And that's honestly where I think 15 out of 16 of our published studies have come from, is just like the anonymous aggregated data that we've been collecting over the years. So like if you look at on our website, which these studies are currently on the reliefapp.com site, 15 of those 16 studies have zero reference of a brand name or product name. It's all cannabinoids, ratios, and outcomes.
Hmm.
And so then going back to your question on like, how can we use it in the aggregate form? Well, right there's an example, right? So the research is one. But yes, to answer your question on the government side of things, the short answer is also yes to that question. There have been a handful of state governments. This is all going to be on like the human side. We haven't done this on the pet side or veterinary side yet. But on the human side, there's been a handful of state government groups, whether like Board of Pharmacy, Department of Health, whoever obviously runs like the medical program in that particular state, where we have worked with them to essentially aggregate data across their state to say like, hey, here's what your citizens who are using these cannabis products are saying about the products that they're using in your state. And like that's been used to, mostly it was used to inform policy decisions around qualifying conditions in the early days. So like we would work with states either as they were implementing their program, or they would want to see, a year or two into the program, like what are people actually using products for, and what's being effective. So like, for example, there was 1 or 2 states where like they didn't have anxiety on the list for a qualifying condition. And then they looked at data that we had with other data out there around the use of cannabis for anxiety and saw like, hey, a lot of people are using cannabis for anxiety in our state, even though it's not legal. And there seems to be a lot of data within this data set that shows people are finding relief from it. But then there's also a lot of data out here from other groups that show cannabis is beneficial at helping with anxiety or calming people. So we'll add that to the list now.
Okay.
So that's been one way. And then, yes, we also have done work on the federal side of things where like the FDA a couple of years ago put out a call to understand the use outcomes and adverse events related to hemp-derived CBD products. And we were able to work with them to collect, that crowdsourced data and show like, hey, here's what, these individuals are saying based on tracking their use and experience with hemp-derived, CBD-based products. So that comes down to like the goal of, again, we want to help individuals make more informed and educated decisions with data, not reviews. So like, yes, oftentimes that is a direct to patient or consumer thing where it's like, hey, Emily, you want to make a decision? Here's a bunch of data to help you make your decision. I don't care what your decision is, but like, just hopefully you're making a more informed one. But that same philosophy can be, hey, state, here's data to help you make more informed decision. Hey, FDA, here's data to help you make more informed decision. Hey, healthcare professional, here's data to help you make more informed decisions. So that hopefully not only accomplishes the goal allowing that group to make the more informed decision, but our hope is that it has the trickle down effect where eventually that will also then find its way back to like an individual, to go back to our original goal of like helping individuals make more informed decisions.
So when an organization signs up to do a MoreBetter program, they're also signing up to have their anonymous data added to the aggregate. And then that is going to, in my opinion, and I feel like you would agree, help propel the validity, the scientific validity of the industry as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the organizations we work with would be happy to be part of that movement.
Yeah. And I would say for the ones who, tense up when they hear data ownership.
Yes. That's I didn't even want to say it. Like I was like,
yeah. Oh, trust me. At this point, like we might as well just be so open about it because it's just like, this is unfortunately, again, going back to like, I forget what I referenced earlier, but your sample size, like educating people on like, do you really need 100 when you don't have 10? It's like, we're not sharing your data. Like your identified data, again, it does us no benefit to do anything public with that, unless if we're doing it in collaboration with you. So I would say for any of the individuals, brand owners, whatever, who tense up when they hear that, I always just say like, here's our website. Here's 15 instances of where we use aggregate data, and chances are your data is already in here and you don't know it. Neither do we. So like, there's really no need to stress around us going out and like selling your data to your competitor, because again, that does us zero benefit.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I mean, I've learned so much during the course of this chat with you. And I think one of the things that I'm really taking away from it is that the mission of MoreBetter is so aligned with the mission of the Veterinary Cannabis Society, and therefore so aligned with all of the people that we partner and collaborate with on an individual basis as well as organizational. And I'm just so excited that we have the veterinary research program to offer specifically to our sponsors. But after talking to you here today, I am going to follow up with an email and all the other ideas that I have going through my head now that I understand your organization even better. Tyler, if someone wants to get a hold of you in order to ask about hosting their own veterinary research program, they can contact us first, but if they're ready and they want to go straight to you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, super accessible via email. So my email is my name, Tyler, Tyler, at more, MORE, better, BETTER, .LTD. So L as in lion, T as in Tom, D as in dog.
Limited.
There you go.
But you're unlimited. The possibilities are unlimited. It should be MoreBetter unlimited.
That might be our new tagline. I like it. That might be the new tagline.
Well, I'm kind of the VCS marketing person in a way. So
there you go.
I obviously deserve the job. So amazing. Well, do you have any questions or comments for me before we let you go?
No, this was great. I'm really glad we had a chance to do this. This partnership and collaboration was, something that was in the making with us and VCS for a while. And as I mentioned throughout the podcast, the animal veterinary space is just like a passion for us. It's just something that we weren't experts in and weren't going to go out of our way to like learn, as you could imagine.
Yeah.
Being able to work together to bring this type of data research and education into this market is just super exciting. And if your audience is the super nerdy data folks, again, those are our people, those who we like to talk to, hang out with, and work with. So that's awesome.
All right, you heard it here first. Nerdy data, veterinary cannabis folks, Tyler's your guy. Well, thank you so much. I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too, Emily.
Thank you so much for listening to this installment of the VCS podcast. If you're interested in partaking in the Veterinary Research Initiative, please reach out to us by emailing donorsupport@veterinarycannabiссociety.org, which is listed in the description below. Or you can comment directly on this video. Comments always help with the algorithm. You can learn more about VCS by visiting veterinarycannabiссociety.org. Find us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Our Instagram handle is @vetcannabis_society. Finally, we'd like to give a heartfelt thanks to our current sponsors and partners: Evermore Pet Food, Antelope Pets and Super Snouts Hemp Company, Standard Process, Hemp Heroes, Earth Buddy Pet, Gaia Provides, Vet CS, Rooted Owl, and Furry Faces CBD. We're always looking for new sponsors, donors, and members. If interested, please reach out to donor support at veterinarycannabiссociety.org.